Welcome, welcome, welcome in. It's that time of the week. It is Thursday. It is time for Losing Sucks, and we are live, baby. It is your host with the most, Dustin Blanton, along with my trusty co-host, Travis Masterson. Travis, thanks again for joining me here.
Yes, sir.
On the Twitterverse. But today, as has been the trend lately with Losing Sucks, we are not alone. We are joined by none other than a wonderful all-around human being. He climbs mountains. He loves the Bears. And for whatever reason, he's okay with the Packers existing. So we'll get to that as we start talking to him. You can find him on Twitter at Dave Kluge. It's Dave Kluge, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me on. How are you guys doing tonight?
Doing great, man. The one and only.
Wonderful. Exactly. If there's another Dave Kluge, I need to know, because if you aren't the
just
right
my
guy,
grandpa. As far as I know, my grandpa is the only other one.
Nice.
Oh, so your dad just decided, like, I'm gonna name him after my dad. I'm not gonna take, like, how did that work out? Did you just decide, like, we're just gonna alternate is your grandson gonna be Dave then?
Really boring. My grandpa was David Michael Kluge. My dad was Michael David Kluge, and then I'm back to David Michael Kluge. I'm gonna buck the trend and just name my kid something completely off the wall.
That's amazing.
Okay. I'm down with it. All right. I like a little family history here on the show, especially when it alternates. I like patterns too. But man, first of all, thank you for joining us. This is awesome to have you on. Got to mix it up a little bit with you for the last few minutes right before the show. As I said, you're a Bears fan. It's awesome to hear that.
Certainly am. Yeah, right now you can see the Lamar Jackson jersey. I do have Bears stuff all behind me as well, but we're on the narrow view today. But yeah, lifetime Bears fan. And I feel like there's a huge overlap between Bears fans and fantasy football analysts, because it's like in our blood to love football, but our team has been terrible for the last 40 years. So people kind of take their love for football and just project that into fantasy football.
Yeah,
I'm sure you notice it, but it seems like half of the industry is from Chicago, and the rest are all Cleveland fans and Buffalo fans. And it's just like these tortured fan bases really get into fantasy football.
It has to be the most prevalent NFL fan base in fantasy.
You think
for
so?
Sure.
More than the Cowboys? You think it's more than the Cowboys?
I think so. Cowboys can take a close second, but I do think I think you're right.
I see a lot of support for it, because you hit it right on the head. I see what the Bears do, and then I'm like, oh man, you know who's really good this year? Since I'm switching focus, the Chiefs. The Chiefs are good. I like their players. We're just gonna focus on them this year.
Yep.
So I feel you on that, man. I feel you. But yeah, man. Thank you for joining the show. We've got a fun bunch of things we want to ask you. Of course, keep it light. The first one, of course. Look, I'll start off with the Bears, because we're talking fantasy. I need someone to make me feel better about what we're doing here, because now that these articles, quotes from Mike Martz absolutely putting the Bears in a grave this year, saying like, I've seen more talent on an 0-16 Lions team. Oof. Like, there's more hope, right?
That's
like
ruthless.
there's gotta be. It's more than just Justin Fields and Mooney, right?
Man, Dustin, if you brought me on the show to hype up the Bears, I got some bad news for you, man. I'm not expecting more than like 2 or 3 wins this year.
It's okay to lie to me, man.
Yeah, Adam Rank had me on his show a while back, and we were talking about the Bears, and it was right after the draft. And I am a realist when it comes to being a fan, and I just, how I wanted to talk about the Bears. I think this is a pretty bad team, but they got a lot of salary cap next year. Hopefully they get a good draft spot. Let's look forward to 2023. All of that stuff. Trying to look forward, trying to find the silver lining. I was getting shredded in the comments the entire time, because it's a Bears show. And then after the show, Adam looks at me and he's like, "What the heck, man? I invited you on my Bears show. You can't just come on here and rip on the Bears for an hour." I didn't realize I was supposed to hype them up, but man, 2022 is going to be bleak. I have no expectations whatsoever this year.
Should have vetted how you felt about the Bears, man, before I go and ask.
Here's what I'll say. From a fantasy aspect, though, I think that there are some pieces of gold that you can find in this offense. Justin Fields is a guy that I love for fantasy purposes. Again, I think that the Bears probably aren't going to exceed 5 wins. I think like the best case scenario is 5 wins. But garbage time points still count. We got to remember just 2 years ago, Deshaun Watson on a 4-win Houston Texans team finishes the QB5. So he's going to be, scrambling for his life a lot, and that's going to translate to a lot of rushing points on the ground. So I think that there's still some things to get excited about. And then also when looking at how targets are going to be distributed, I think it is going to be very narrowly focused through Cole Kmet and Darnell Mooney. So I think both of those guys, they make for solid targets as well. The scary thing is the touchdown equity. I mean, we saw it last year. Darnell Mooney had 140 targets and hardly finished as a wide receiver too. And I could see something like that happening again where he could pull, an elite target share, but if he only finishes with 3 or 4 touchdowns, he might not be great for fantasy. Justin Fields, though, is a guy that I am drafting a ton of. And you could speak to this, Dustin, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Justin Fields wasn't supposed to start last year. I mean, he was supposed to kind of slowly develop. He didn't get any first team reps any first team reps in the offseason. He was supposed to kind of slowly develop, and then Andy Dalton got injured. He had to step in, and he was abysmal. I mean, he was terrible for those first few games. But if you look at the last 4 games, he did show some signs of being a decent quarterback. And most importantly, he averaged 64 rushing yards per game over those last 4 games.
That's nice.
Look at that over a whole 17-game season. That's 1,088 rushing yards. That is Lamar Jackson type rushing upside.
That's productive.
I don't know if he could do it over a whole season, but I think 700 to 800 yards is very realistic. And we can see a Jalen Hurts type season from Fields this year.
I think so. The second half of games is going to be a lot of fun for Kmet, Mooney, Justin Fields fantasy owners. It can be really rough in the first half of the actual game, but come halftime and that 10 becomes 20, it's everybody's going to eat, especially in PPR leagues, because they're going to be coming from behind. One guy that makes me nervous, and I drafted him in a 14-team league 2 nights ago, traded him away the next morning for Mike Williams, is David Montgomery. The reason why he makes me nervous, it's not volume. It's just that, like you said, touchdown equity. How many scoring chances are they really going to have? And of those, how many of those rushing touchdowns are going to Fields? Probably more than you would want if you're going to take a guy in the 3rd or 4th round. My question to you about Montgomery is this. Given that he starts with San Francisco and Green Bay, is he somebody that you are okay buying for cheaper come week 3 or 4? As the schedule loosens up a bit, because that team that if you're spending a 3rd or 4th round on Montgomery and you go 0-2 or 1-3, all of a sudden you're in a position of having to make a move, and you can get Montgomery if you're 3-0 or 3-1, you can go get him for pretty cheap. Is that somebody you want, or are you still staying away?
Well, like I said, I'm in on Justin Fields, I'm in on Cole Kmet, and I'm sort of halfway in on Darnell Mooney. I can't be in on everybody. And that means the one guy that I am out on at cost is David Montgomery. I just don't think that he's really going to be able to live up to his stock. I don't know how you guys feel about David Montgomery, but I just don't think that he's particularly great running back. He kind of does everything well, but doesn't do anything great. And he's he can be a 3-down back, but now we've got Khalil Herbert in the mix. And I think that Khalil Herbert is going to take a much bigger chunk than people want him to. The new offensive coordinator, we saw it with Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones. They're not going to feed any guy 80% of the snaps. It's going to be some sort of split. So that's why I think that we're drafting David Montgomery off of what he's done the last few seasons, where Matt Nagy has really used him as a workhorse. And I don't think that he's going to have that workhorse role this year. So I think that he'll see his value dip and you'll be able to buy low on him. But I'm also afraid that it could be sort of a falling knife where his value is just plummeting because he's not putting up the points, and then you end up trading for him, hoping that he's going to bounce back, and he never really bounces back. And he's a guy who's seeing 12 carries, 2 targets every single game, finishes the year with 3 or 4 touchdowns. And Montgomery is just a guy that I'm almost completely out on at cost this year.
So even if he starts fine, let's say he starts with 20 touches a game in the first 2, goes for 85 to 100, and finds a way in the end zone both games. Is it fool's gold? You're still staying away.
Yeah. And I mean, if he does that, at that point, if I have him, because, I'm in a ton of drafts, and every once in a while players will slide. I can't say that I'm going to have 0% exposure on David Montgomery because maybe something crazy happens and he slips to me in the 5th or 6th round of a draft and I end up having him. If he starts off that hot, you better believe I'm trying to sell high wherever I can.
You said you're in a ton of drafts. That's one thing I noticed when I was reading some of your stuff. You were in 500 drafts. What are you doing?
How?
Underdog fantasy. So I don't know if you guys do underdog or best ball at all.
Yeah, we do underdog, but what you do
I
is
feel like 100 is
not,
a lot.
That's
It's
yeah,
not
some
normal.
a lot of people do underdog. You are underdog. Like that's
Yeah,
like,
I
at
do
that
it.
point.
I do it quite a bit. And it's something I kind of dipped my toes in last year. I did like 150 drafts last season and made some money on them and said, wow, this is a lot of fun. So this year I said I'm going all in. And, now I do some best ball articles. I've got a show that I do with James Brimacombe every single Tuesday where we draft
Sweet.
teams as well. And pretty
That's
much
awesome.
my plan is anytime they open up these small contests where it's a $3 buy-in or a $5 buy-in, I try to max it out. And I basically want as many darts in that contest as I possibly can. So looking at like the big tournament, the $25 buy-in, I'm not going to max that out just because that's going to cost a few $1,000s. But
Yeah.
if they're doing a $3 tournament with 150 max entries, I'll throw $450 in there and I will just immediately draft 150 teams and make sure that I have as good of a chance as anybody to take down that entire tournament and win $50,000.
So what you're saying is when
love
we
that.
see these $3 capped leagues, don't get in them because you've already won them.
Well, I'm not the only one either.
Throwing 10 $3 teams in there is like, you're not winning that.
So I say 500 over the entire offseason, and that sounds crazy. Like I said,
Right.
my co-host James Brimacombe, you want to talk about a volume drafter? This guy had done 1,000 drafts before the NFL draft. Before the NFL draft even happened,
Oh,
from February
Man's at his
until
desk so bored.
April,
Like,
he
what's
did
$3?
1,000 drafts.
Yeah.
So
Man.
I think I'm a degenerate, and then I talk to some of these other guys, and it kind of puts it into perspective for me, and makes me feel like I'm not nearly as bad as some of the others.
No.
Yeah, I'm doing just fine.
Wow, that's incredible. Hey, hats off to you. I mean, that's some dedication, and wow. I mean, you got to be like, well, how many drafts a day would you say you do then?
I've had some days. You got to remember, I'm coming off a shoulder injury where I had surgery and I was basically posted up in a recliner, unable to do anything for 2 months. So that's kind of how I got through my shoulder recovery, was doing
Gotcha.
somewhere between 25, 30 drafts a day. But what I'll also say is that I can do multiple drafts at once. So I'm at the point now
Right.
where, I input my rankings in there and I'll fire off 5 quick drafts at the same time and, kind of
Oh, whoa.
auto drafting off of my rankings for the first few rounds and then, building in as the drafts go on. But, you also mix some slow drafts in there. One day I'm bored and I'll just enter 50 slow drafts. And then over the next couple of weeks, I'll knock out 50 slow drafts. So yeah, it was best balling was pretty much a part-time job for me this offseason.
I like
Okay.
it. I like
Do
it.
you,
It passes the time.
Do you find yourself drafting a lot of Miles Sanders in these drafts?
Oh, not especially. Miles Sanders isn't a guy that I'm too crazy about. Love the talent, but he told us not to draft him. Like, this guy was on a podcast a month ago and he said, do not draft me in fantasy football. I don't know how much clearer it can get than that.
Yeah, you don't get that too often.
What you said, he is talented. It's not that you don't believe in the talent. It's just that the situation, whether it's a crowded backfield or Hurts' legs or the coach not believing fully, whatever the case is, Sanders has not been able to take the next step. But when you watch him play, you say he could be a top 10. His talent is top 10 level in the NFL. He's electric. He can do everything. Why they don't give him everything, I'm not sure. But if he continues to slide into the 7th, 8th round, I have been taking a lot of him just on the upside that Gainwell is not necessarily injury proof. I feel like he plays the whole season or played the whole season with the questionable tag. And now he's starting the season with a little hip injury. If news came out tonight, Gainwell's supposed to miss 8 to 12 weeks, where would you put Sanders?
I think then he gets, probably a 3-round bump. I think that's a pretty
he's in
significant
the
bump.
3rd or 4th.
Right. Yeah. So
it doesn't
that's
take
a good way to
much
look
for
at it.
somebody that good to be a league-winning type guy.
I think looking at it right now, though, we're kind of looking at a 3-headed committee, and that's what's frustrating. And when you look at the touches, you want those high-value touches for running backs. High-value touches, of course, being targets and goal line work. And that's where I think Miles Sanders doesn't fit in at all. I think that he's probably going to see, a healthy Miles Sanders probably sees 200 carries this year. But last year, Kenneth Gainwell, his strength was in the passing game. He looked really, really good as a pass catcher. He was 6th in yards per route run, which for a rookie is phenomenal. So I think that when you're looking at how this is going to break down, Kenneth Gainwell is going to see all the passing down work, and then Jalen Hurts is their de facto goal line back. So what we could see with Miles Sanders is 150 to 200 carries throughout the season. Might get another, 30 to 40 targets in there. But with him not getting targets and him not getting passing down work. It could be a 1,200-yard season with 3 touchdowns and hardly any catches. Really good for football, not so great for fantasy output.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially for where you're having to take him. Yeah, I like Gainwell. That's a good point. I think his history as a receiver, especially in that system. I mean, do you really want a check down back, even if that's what you want to call a potential for Miles Sanders with a rushing quarterback like Hurts, who doesn't check it down much? Like that there's not much meat on the bone, so to speak.
And when you're doing all these drafts, you kind of have to plant flags. And
Yeah.
I planted a flag on Kenneth Gainwell, and that's a guy who right now he is in my top 5 rostered running backs overall. I just cannot stop drafting Kenneth Gainwell. You can get him 4 or 5 rounds after, and like you said with Miles Sanders, if something happens to Kenneth Gainwell, Miles Sanders jumps up 3 or 4 rounds. If something happens to Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell is all of a sudden a 5th or 6th round pick. So it kind of goes both ways. So for me, it is a cloudy backfield, and a lot of times you're better off just taking the cheaper option in that ambiguous backfield because injuries happen, trades happen, so much volatility with the running back position that sometimes it just makes sense to take the cheaper option.
Right. No, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. It definitely goes both ways with the injuries. Man, Kenneth Gainwell, I salivate at the upside. Is there anyone that you have a tough time though, like deciding between when you're in, the thousands of drafts, I'm sure. So like Miles Sanders was the guy that Travis said he has. Where do you typically have a tough time deciding, okay, do I go running back, like maybe the value's starting to shift, or is there a round or two that you see where the values tend to turn there?
So I think, and I just actually tweeted, somebody asked me about this, one of the favorite spots to draft. And I noticed there's a big tier fall off in the middle of the 3rd round. So I think that this year it's very advantageous to have an early round pick in the 1st round. First of all, you've got that top 5 that I feel like is pretty clear cut and solidified. And, of course, I'm talking about Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Jamar Chase, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor. However you want to, mix those 5 people up. I don't think it really matters. You can make a case for any of them to go first overall if you really want to. But I think that's kind of the clear-cut top 5. And I think if you get one of those picks, barring injury, you've got somebody that has a very good potential to finish number 1 overall at their position. And then I like that even better when you get to the 2nd and 3rd round, because that's where I feel like there's a pretty big tier fall off. If you're picking early in the 3rd round, you can get a Kyle Pitts, Michael Pittman, AJ Brown, Leonard Fournette might slip there. But once you look at the back half of the 3rd round, then all of a sudden it's Marquise Brown, Jalen Waddle. I feel like there's a huge difference in talent. So for me, that's what I like, is picking early in the 1st, because I feel like I get, one of those stud top 5 picks, and then you're getting 2 really good players at the 2-3 pick. And when you're picking late in the draft, you can really load up with 2 early guys at the 1-2 turn and get 2 really good guys there. But then I feel like the talent at 3-4 is lacking. And, the kind of the best guys available there, Breece Hall and Allen Robinson, good players, but they don't have nearly the upside that those guys in the early 3rd do.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, I haven't had in best ball, actually, on Underdog, I think I have like a 30% exposure to Christian McCaffrey over like 120 leagues. It's been wild.
Just taking him 1 overall?
Either 1 overall or earlier in the summer, in the spring even, you've got Taylor, Kupp, JJ. People were just not ready to say Christian McCaffrey deserves the 1 or the 2. So I would take him as late as 8 in February, March, April. And it just, every time I see him, I would take him. And now if I get beyond 8, he's obviously going much earlier. I'm doing the same thing with Travis Kelce. When it gets to 9, I'll go Kelce, and then I'll go probably best running back on the way back, and then load up receiver the next 3 or 4. Kelce is somebody that I tweeted about today, and it sparked some good conversation. People are not sold on Kelce continuing to do what Kelce has done. People are thinking the age is finally caught up to him, or they need Tyreek, or now it's crowded with Juju and the rookie and MVS. I stand on the side of, until Travis Kelce doesn't get 1,100 to 1,300 yards, I think he's going to do that. Do you believe that we see the same Kelce, or do you think we start to see a decline?
I mean, Father Time's undefeated. We hear it all the time. And no tight end over the age of 32 has ever eclipsed 1,000 yards. And that's where Travis Kelce is right now. So either he falls off the age cliff like every other tight end at his age has, or he defies history. So, I mean, those are the 2 outcomes this year. Either he has a historic season or he falls off like everybody else. I'm gonna bet on the talent just because it's Travis Kelce. I mean, you can't not bet on Travis Kelce.
Right.
I'm kind of
Yeah.
with you. As long as until he stops putting out 1,100 to 1,300 yards every single season, that's kind of what you've got to expect for him. And I think that now he's just going to see even more work. I think that he benefited from Tyreek Hill. You know, anytime you got Tyreek Hill on the
Yeah.
field, that's going to be a focal point of the defense. Now they're going to turn their sights on Kelce a little bit, but we've seen this guy can beat linebackers, defensive backs. It doesn't matter. Anybody that's matched up on him, he can outrun, he can outcatch, he can break tackles. So I'm not extremely concerned about Kelce, and that's where I've got him too. You know, I just tweeted out this thread the other day, kind of walking through my process of how I'm attacking drafts, and there are times where I'll take Kelce as early as 106. You know, once we
Yeah.
get out of that top 5 that I talked about, there's some times where just to, you know, get some contrarian builds that are a little bit different, not adhering straight to ADP, I'll take Kelce as early as 106 and feel pretty comfortable.
The Chiefs forced touches to him, like in so many different ways. It's not, you're never going to say with Kelce, oh, well, they double teamed him or they took this way and they struggled to get him the ball. They're going to get him the ball, even if it's out of the backfield or in the slot, or they line him up outside or at quarterback and run a wildcat. Like they've done everything with him because they realize he needs the ball in his hands. I just,
Those shovel passes right up the gut of the goal line.
you always love the guys that are great, and especially if you've had them on championship winning teams. But I'm far from being done touting Kelce as a first round pick.
I think the one thing I'll say about Kelce that's kind of a knock towards him a little bit, not a knock towards Kelce, you know, the player or the talent or anything like that, but I don't know if there's a huge tier break this year. You know, Kelce has always been the guy that's in a tier of his own. And now with Kyle
Right.
Pitts and Mark Andrews, I have all of those guys bunched together in the same tier. And you got to play ADP to some respect. But if ADP was reflective of Kyle Pitts and Mark Andrews being early second round picks, I'd be okay taking them in the late first. I think that they are that good. They have tight end 1 in their range of outcomes. The nice thing, though, is that you can get these guys in the early third round pick. You know, you don't have to pay up for them. So as much as I like Kelce, if I don't get him in the first round, I'm just as happy getting Kyle Pitts or, you know, Mark Andrews the next round or Kyle Pitts 2 rounds later. I feel like all of those guys have very similar ranges of outcomes.
Right.
For sure. Yeah. I've been on the Kyle Pitts train for a while, trying to convince Travis that he's going to be the next Kelce has been a task.
I don't think it's Kyle Pitt's fault. Obviously, when you watch him play, you see this is the next Kelce. However, it's the situation and the quarterbacks that they have. I just don't think it's time yet. I don't think that he's going to pay off a second or third round. I think his ceiling is 1,000 yards, 1,100 with 6 touchdowns. We'll see.
Interesting.
I mean, that's pretty darn good for a tight end. And we got to remember that Marcus Mariota, you know, we haven't seen him play in a while, but Marcus Mariota, his favorite target the whole time he was starting in Tennessee was Delaney Walker.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he has a penchant for really throwing 2 tight ends. So, you know, Kyle Pitts, I can go on and on and on about this guy.
Absolutely.
I wasn't too crazy about drafting him last year just because I thought there was a lot of risk with him being a rookie and, you know, historical rookie production from the tight end position. But now it seems like his value hasn't budged at all in Dynasty. Like Kyle Pitts now is going for the same price that he did prior to ever playing an NFL game. And now he has all of the risk removed because he has hit the parameters and he's already showed what he can do, put up the best rookie season of all time. Unless you want to go back to Mike Ditka. I mean, what Kyle Pitts did last year was great.
Yeah, it was.
And,
it was.
yeah, the touchdowns are scary. But that's also kind of a Matt Ryan thing. You know, Matt Ryan, even when he had Julio Jones and Roddy White and Tony Gonzalez, he's just not a huge touchdown scorer for whatever reason. When he throws those touchdowns, they always go to the ancillary receivers. He never throws to his main target in the red zone. So I think that's kind of why we didn't see the touchdowns with Kyle Pitts last year. I see that regressing a lot this season.
Is that a Paris Campbell comment you just made?
Harris Campbell, more so Ashton Doolin. I think I love some Ashton Doolin.
I like
too.
Doolin. I'm glad you brought Matt Ryan up because he's it's a perfect segue into kind of the next thing I wanted to ask you about is. So you brought up Michael Pittman as being a guy that maybe you target at the early third, a guy that I've seen rising up and has been taken around that third, fourth round area is Allen Robinson. So where's the break here? Because they're 2 hot names right now in fantasy, and it's a lot of people are going to be facing this decision. You just mentioned maybe Matt Ryan has some trouble throwing touchdowns. Maybe that finds its way over to affecting the upside of Michael Pittman. What are your thoughts on those 2, and where do you find yourself taking these guys?
I am these are 2 of my most rostered guys, and Love the early offseason when you're drafting, and I was getting Michael Pittman in the 5th and 6th round of drafts, and now you got to really pay up for him. But I still feel like he's a great value. I was just tweaking my rankings this morning and saw that I am much higher on Michael Pittman and Allen Robinson than the consensus. Michael Pittman is my wide receiver 7. Allen Robinson is my wide receiver 12. So I am very bullish on those guys.
Yes,
and I did a show with Marcus Grant earlier today, and I said that Allen Robinson was a top 12 guy for me, and he said I've got him inside my top 15, and I feel like I'm too low on him. So it feels like everybody's warming up. And you got to feel Marcus Grant. He works across the street from SoFi Stadium. He's in there watching these practices, and from every report out of camp is that Allen Robinson has been tearing it up. Dustin, you're a Bears fan. You know this.
Yeah,
Allen Robinson has been a dog, and last year it's not that he just all of a sudden sucked at football. He just gave up. And honestly, I don't blame him. Like, the Bears, he made it very apparent that he wanted to be with the Bears long term. And they said, well, here's your franchise tag. The same week that they franchise tagged him, they were whining and dining Kenny Galladay and offering him $60 million a year. So I completely understand why Allen Robinson checked out last season.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, why would you sacrifice your body, your future, when obviously the team is not invested? They're not putting the best guy in the best position, even Andy Dalton, and then you don't want to give your rookie any time to acclimate in the offseason. So no, why would you give your all, risk an injury when you have a contract year coming up, and now look at him, look at the position he's in. I love hearing that he's tearing it up. I couldn't agree more, though, that the value was there with Michael Pittman, and then people started to really catch on to, this guy's not just a big body, fly down the receiver, Mike Williams early in his career kind of guy. He can run routes. And I think that's really what we're going to see with the Colts this year is a lot better usage. He's not Carson Wentz. He can actually make those intermediate throws, and he's very accurate. So I'm looking forward to the work that he's going to do.
And, last year it was kind of weird how people had completely written off Michael Pittman. I wrote an article about him last offseason, and I said, what are we doing here? This guy was 2 picks away from being a first-round pick. He's got a speed score inside the 90th percentile. He's 6'4". He can run every single route in the tree. Like, he is a very polished, good receiver. And if you remember last year, he was getting drafted in the 15th, 16th round. I mean, you can get this guy at the very end of your draft. And I didn't understand it. So I had Michael Pittman everywhere last year.
Same.
I was trading second-round picks in Dynasty for him. I've got Michael Pittman on all my rosters.
Everywhere.
Beautiful.
And even now, with the spike in ADP, I feel like he is still a great value. Talked about this the other day, but he broke out on 129 targets last year. He did not get force-fed the ball. 129 targets is not a lot. And if you look at Matt Ryan dating back to 2009, he has averaged 161 targets per season to his wide receiver one. So we should be seeing even more work going Michael Pittman's way this season, and not just more work, but more accurate targets as well. I mean, this could be the year where Michael Pittman elevates himself into that, high-end elite wide receiver one tier.
Do you prefer him to Allen Robinson right now?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just by a little or clear? Every time you're taking him?
Yeah. He's got him as
about
wide receiver
2 rounds.
7.
Yeah, he's my wide receiver 7. So it's Michael Pittman at 7, Higgins at 8. I got a few other guys. I can't even remember off the top of my head. Tyreek Hill, somebody else, and then Allen Robinson. AJ Brown, that's it. Yeah.
AJ Brown. Yeah.
Debo is 13, and oh my gosh. And I had to tweak these rankings today.
Okay.
Our football guys social media team. Well, and this is another one where Debo, banging the drum for him. He was my guy last offseason. I had him on every single roster. I spent all offseason saying Debo is the guy you want in San Francisco. Brandon Ayuk is not the guy. I mean, it was just I spent all offseason hyping up Debo Samuel, and he blew away my expectations. And now I think that he's getting a little bit overdrafted. I don't think he's going to keep scoring from 80 yards out consistently. I don't think he's going to be getting goal line touches. So it's, I love Debo Samuel, the player, but not crazy about him where he's getting drafted in the second round.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I mean, we all have our guys. We all have guys we want to succeed. Now, I love that you were on top of Debo. He's a guy that I hate that I kind of fell off the train a little bit heading into year. What was it? It was his third year last year, and I hate that. I was huge when he came into the league. I was a big fan. Still as fan, year 2, and then I'm like, you know what? I gotta temper the expectations. Maybe he's just one of those guys that they use him in ways he's gonna get hurt. And then of course, last year happens, and I'm like, okay, well, there it is. One guy I'm kind of like that right now is Breece Hall, and I look. now that Michael Carter's the running back 1, I feel like we should get some value heading into drafts.
Stop.
I need to sell the narrative, I see this. Look, as soon as I saw that, I was salivating. I'm like, please, somebody buy into this, please.
I drafted Breece Hall at 58th overall in a draft today. Like, people are buying into the Michael Carter running back 1 talk, and he's sliding into the 5th and 6th round. I'm loving it.
I still think this is the year Justin Jefferson passes BC Johnson. I think this is going to happen. I feel like we're finally here. We finally made it.
Yeah, is Marlon Mack still the guy that's keeping Jonathan Taylor from breaking out?
Right,
Breece Hall is a stud. There's no chance. Breece Hall is going to be an absolute stud. I'm not concerned about him in the slightest. And we see this all the time with these rebuilding teams where they'll take a 5th or 6th round rookie and just feed him a ton of volume, and he looks really good. And then when they make that switch from like, okay, we're not rebuilding anymore, now it's time to actually win some games, the first thing that team does is go out and spend a premium draft pick on a running back. And we saw this with the Jacksonville Jaguars. James Robinson had 2 great years, and then the team went out and brought in Travis Etienne. We saw it with the Bears, if you want to go back a little while. Jordan Howard, 5th round pick, had 2 great seasons, and then the team went out and brought in David Montgomery. And I feel like that's just where Michael Carter is right now. Had a great rookie season, but the team, you don't spend an early 2nd round pick on a running back unless you plan to feature him.
Right. That's a good point. You also don't bring in a quarterback without some weapons, right? I'm of course talking about Russell Wilson. Look, we could stay. Look, I try to avoid talking about the Jets. I bring up Breece Hall. I'm like, all right, we're in the Jets. Like, outside of Breece Hall, is it really just Elijah Moore and no one else? Like,
I really like Garrett Wilson.
Really? Okay.
I do. Big fan of Garrett Wilson, and this is another one of those. When we were talking kind of earlier about Miles Sanders and Kenneth Gainwell, and I prefer the cheaper option. That's kind of how I'm looking at these receivers too. I mean, Elijah Moore was great last season, but Garrett Wilson, they went out and they spent a top 10 pick on Garrett Wilson, and he's getting drafted 6 rounds later. That's crazy to me. I mean, Garrett Wilson, he's a polished, pro-ready receiver. I think that there's a good chance that Elijah Moore outscores him, but I don't know if he's worth the extra, 4 to 6 rounds that you have to pay up to get him.
Okay, so speaking of that's the next thing on our show sheet is number 2 wide receivers on their teams. Do you find yourself taking more of the number 2s at their costs, or are there certain number 1s that you think are absolutely worth their price tag? For example, Keenan and Mike Williams, Chase and T. Higgins, Kupp and Robinson, Sutton, Judy. The list goes on and on. Do you, as an identity as a drafter, do you find yourself saying, I'll take the second guy cheaper most of the time, or do you want the one on certain teams clearly?
I do find myself going for the second guy often. And, one guy that you didn't mention, or one team you didn't mention, we already talked about a little bit, the Eagles, but I love Devonza Smith. And that doesn't mean that I dislike A.J. Brown, but getting Devonza Smith in the 8th round as opposed to A.J. Brown in the early 3rd is wild to me. I mean, this guy's coming off a 90-target season where he was beating number 1 defensive backs. Now he gets some of the pressure taken off of him. So I look at every single team a little bit differently, and I feel like you kind of have to. I just recently did a show with JJ Zacharyson on my show where this is exactly what we talked about, these kind of ambiguous wide receiver rooms and how we're attacking them. And we went through team by team, kind of discussing all of them. And there's some teams where we said, both of these guys are great values. If we're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, for instance, give me Jamar Chase at ADP, give me T. Higgins at ADP, give me Tyler Boyd at ADP. I will take everybody in the Bengals passing game at ADP. Then there's some other ones, like I don't think we should be paying up for Keenan Allen the way that we are. The age cliff is approaching for him. We saw what Mike Williams could do in that X receiver role last year, and I think that we might see a little bit more of it this season. So I look at every single team a little bit different, and while I do prefer a lot of the cheaper options, there's some guys that I'm okay paying up for. Give me Kupp in the early 1st, give me Sutton over Judy. Chase and Higgins, I'm happy with both of them.
Diggs
but
is somebody
every
into
team,
the 1st, start of the 2nd. The gap between Diggs and Davis to me is enormous.
And I prefer Diggs there personally.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I prefer the price of Diggs, even if it's a 1st or an early 2nd, at the turn, as opposed to saying, "Oh, I'll get Davis in the 6th." Like you don't know what you're getting yet.
Yeah, and I think Gabe Davis's ADP is so inflated right now, and I think it's because we're in best ball season where people want to stack so much, and they spend a 1st round pick on Stephon Diggs, spend a 3rd round pick on Josh Allen, and then they're like, well, I don't want to miss losing out on Gabe Davis. So come the 4th round, they pull the trigger on Gabe Davis, and it's just skewing his ADP. Gabe Davis is a player that I like. I think that the opportunity is there for him to break out, but he profiles as like a 6th or 7th round pick, not where he's going in the 4th or 5th.
Yeah, I think it's gotten out of hand for sure. But it just comes down to one primetime game in the playoffs. Even if he just has 1 touchdown or 2 touchdowns, it's like he's still a 7th or 8th round pick. One game,
and we have short memories. That's what
skyrockets.
Yeah, for sure.
Kyler Murray has 1 bad playoff game, and now you can draft him in the 7th round.
It's
I mean, that's
unreal.
What, like,
I have so much Kyler, and I don't even love rooting for Kyler, but I'm like, I can't pass that. I can't pass that.
Yeah, there is such an edge that you can get in fantasy football just by pivoting off whatever the postseason overreaction from the year before was.
Early Dynasty, it was like that. I was getting Allen Robinson so late, and Dustin and I were talking in March, April, and I'm like, I have Allen Robinson everywhere. He's my number 1 receiver owned in best ball. And it's not from this past month or two. It's all from March, April when people were like, he's done. It's like he's on this offense. He's far from done. He threw in the towel, like you said. He didn't just start sucking at football.
Yeah. Well, yes. Same thing with Aaron Rodgers. I don't think. Look, I hate talking about the Packers. I almost didn't want to bring it up, but I feel like he's someone who people assume that he just sucks at football now because he doesn't have Devontae Adams, and I don't understand it really. Like he's two MVPs now, and then he's he's going as the QB
13.
QB
13 or 14. I think it's 14 last I saw. And this has been, and again, I'm a Bears fan, but I am all in on the Packers for fantasy football this year. I've written articles on Allen Lazard. I've written articles on Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Aaron Rodgers. I am in on everybody in Green Bay. And the numbers show it, and it's not a small sample size either. Since I almost said Sean McVay. Since why am I totally drawing a blank right now? LaFleur, yes. Since LaFleur showed up in 2019, Aaron Rodgers has been playing the best ball of his career. 111 touchdowns and 13 interceptions over the last 3 years. That's bonkers. QB6 last year, QB3 the year before that. But what's even wilder is since 2019, we have a 7-game sample size where Devontae Adams didn't play. So this isn't, one game that I'm extrapolating. We're looking at almost half a season.
Yeah.
And in those games, higher touchdown rate, lower interception rate. He averaged 50 more passing yards per game. And it's just, Aaron Rodgers is a great player, but he had this, you'd see he would force feed the ball to Devontae Adams. You'd see first down, second down, third down from the 1 yard line. He'd throw 3 straight targets to Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
I think they both kind of wanted to pad each other's stats a little bit, but when Devontae Adams isn't in the game, LaFleur just calls such a good game, and he's able to scheme players to get open. And then when Aaron Rodgers goes through his reads, I think that he's just a better player. And, I've kind of been the Allen Lazard guy all offseason, beating the drum for him.
I love it.
But I think that Allen Lazard's going to have some huge weeks. I think Randall Cobb's going to have some big weeks. We're going to see Christian Watson pop on some weeks. And it's just similar to what you see Shanahan doing, just scheming individual players up for every single game. I think that we're going to see that same sort of mindset from LaFleur this year. And I think that Rodgers, we know that he's a very much so like a chip on his shoulder guy. I think that he might just go scorched earth this year and have one of the best seasons of his career, just despite Devontae Adams.
I love that you're saying this. I have a draft coming up at 9:15, and I had planned on Hurts in the 6th if he's there, but now I'm tempted to say just wait on Rodgers. You were the first one on Lazard. I have to give you your flowers here. As far as Twitter goes, you were absolutely the first one to say Allen Lazard is going to be that dude in this offense. And I started watching more Allen Lazard, following all of your arguments, all your, you were showing your work. You weren't just making a claim, which is what you see a lot of. And as you started to explain this, I'm like, this dude's onto something. Allen Lazard, especially at ADP, is going to be owned by me in as many redraft leagues as possible. And I've been able to do that. The decision comes down to, in that round, do you want somebody like Chase Edmonds or Damian Harris or Stevenson, or do you want a guy like Allen Lazard in your flex? And the answer to me is Allen Lazard. And it's because of the work that you've done. But if you have any new work or you want to reemphasize why that's the case, I'm here for it.
Well, we talk about how I just mentioned how Aaron Rodgers would just force feed Devontae Adams. in the red zone, and that's because Aaron Rodgers likes his numbers. He likes putting up those big gaudy numbers. We know that about Aaron Rodgers, and I think that he's going to do the same with Lazard. Lazard is 6'4". He's got hands like a bear trap. He profiles to be that guy in the red zone. We're not going to see him throwing underneath routes to Randall Cobb once they get down to the goal line. He's going to be just throwing jump balls up to the biggest guy in the field, which happens to be Allen Lazard. So I don't know if he's not going to put up 160 targets, 170 targets like Devontae Adams did, but would it shock anybody if Allen Lazard finishes the season with 15, 18 touchdowns, just goes absolutely berserk at the goal line? I could absolutely see that happening.
I could see it. I mean, I think 10 to 12 to me is a very safe floor.
Yeah.
Whoa. When you're deciding between Mooney, who I love, and Lazard, let's say they both get 140 targets. The efficiency of Allen Lazard's targets are so different, especially with the scoring opportunities they're going to have. Do you have Lazard over Mooney?
I do. Literally one spot ahead.
All right.
Allen Lazard is my wide receiver 21, and Mooney is my wide receiver 22. That's like good. You said, I think Mooney could see 140 targets from Justin Fields, and 100 targets from Aaron Rodgers is more valuable. Yeah. So I don't think that he's going to pull the same target share. But last year, Aaron Rodgers had the 6th best passer rating in the NFL when targeting Allen Lazard. I mean, they have that connection down pat already. The big thing is just schematically. When you're looking at how this team is going to work out, MBS is gone. And Allen Lazard does not have the speed to play the MBS role. That's just not what he's able to do. He can't stretch the field as that flanker. That's going to be Christian Watson and Romeo Dubes. And then in the slot, it's going to be some sort of mix. We might see Tunyon in there a little bit. We're going to see maybe Amari Rodgers, but it's going to mostly be Aaron Jones and Randall Cobb playing the slot. There's only one guy that profiles to play the X receiver in this offense, and that's Allen Lazard. He's got the trust and the chemistry with Aaron Rodgers. He's going to be the primary read on the majority of their passing plays. I mean, I've been talking about it all offseason, but Allen Lazard is going to smash this year.
I love it. Don't come knocking on my door, Dustin. You had a chance to draft him.
I was just thinking that. I'm like, Dave.
Everything that you're saying right now, I'm like, yes, keep going.
And now it's at the point everyone knows I'm the Allen Lazard guy, so it's impossible for me to draft him in the draft. I'll be in the 5th round, and somebody will snipe me on Allen Lazard just so they can be like, ha, I got him, and you didn't. So when I'm in these underdog drafts, I'm still sprinkling them in, but any draft that's with people I know, it's impossible for me to get Allen Lazard.
That's part of it, man. Double-edged sword.
I get I'm in a 16-team Superflex league with Travis, and I all off season I've gotten nothing but Jacoby Brissett offers for Allen Lazard because I have one quarterback.
And it's like, you're in that league, the Jerry Maguire league.
I am.
He's got 800 leagues. You think
maybe not.
You think he knows if we're in?
I thought
the
you
league
were.
Together?
We're in that Twitter content creator league.
Oh
together.
yeah, that's right.
That's the one that I thought was a dynasty startup, and I traded back my picks, and I got Chris Godwin and Deshaun Watson, and I was like, I'm gonna go.
That was me. You traded the pick to me, and I took Mahomes.
Yeah, so I
and it turned into Watson.
I thought it was a dynasty startup, and then I found out it's redraft afterwards, and I'm just like, well, cool. Hopefully,
this will be fun.
I botched that one. I swear when we were drafting, it said dynasty at the time, and then after the draft, all of a sudden it was a redraft league.
Yeah, I remember that trade. I'm texting Dustin like, that's a lot to give up for Mahomes, but he's like, not really. So I did it, and then you took Watson. I'm like, dang, that could really work out for him, and then it didn't. That's unfortunate. Oh, wow. You can have Jacoby though.
Wow, that's no one wants Jacoby. Man, that's a good point. I really wanted to talk about Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson because right now it's like I make it a point in my life just to be my happiest self and never draft a Patriots running back. So I don't know what to do here because they're always sitting there, and Ramondre Stevenson has been this boiling up, a volcano, whatever you want to call him. He's rising, and then for whatever reason, I don't know that Damian Harris has inherently done anything to cause himself to fall below Ramondre Stevenson. All he did was finish as the running back 15. Granted, he had 15 touchdowns, and he doesn't receive passes much. Where do you have these guys falling in your hierarchy? Because it's a situation I'm never going to touch, but it's something I'm interested in getting some insight in from very far away.
I've still got Damian Harris inside my top 24, and I think I'm the last one standing. Everybody has swung. And I got to say first, you can go back and find I was hyping up Damian Harris all last offseason, and everybody was telling me I was crazy for it. And maybe I'm just trying to catch lightning in a bottle again here with the Patriots running back. But we were looking at, in the 2020 season, if you look at the overall numbers at the end of the year, it looked like it was split between Sony Michel and Damian Harris. But in the 2 games that they played together where they were both healthy, Damian Harris got 3 times as many touches. He was twice as productive with his touches. He got all of the goal line work. And I said, wow, we didn't see a huge workload from Damian Harris, but when he and Sony Michel were both healthy, Bill Belichick really preferred Damian Harris. Look at it last year, and we're looking at something kind of similar where these guys were, we had some healthy scratches from Rhamondre Stevenson. We had Damian Harris getting knocked out at halftime in a few games. Damian Harris.
He was doghoused.
Yeah.
He fumbled at the goal line 2 or 3 times. He could have had 18 or 20 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm. But
then he goes doghouse, and it's like, what? You just hope that he comes back out because he was killing in the first half. And
I think you're talking about that Houston game where he fumbled, and I think they said it was a concussion. They said that he had an injury, but I think he was doghouse.
Right. I had a share of him, and I was like, oh, he's going for 40 today.
Yeah, he started out, I think he had like 100. He had like 100 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half, and then didn't touch the field in the second half. And I think the narrative at the time was a doghouse, and then it came out afterwards that he had suffered a concussion, and that's what knocked him out. But overall, we're looking at 7 games where Damian Harris and Rhamondre Stevenson were both healthy from beginning to end of the game. And in those games, Rhamondre Stevenson had 49 carries, 262 yards, and a touchdown. Now, that's decent, but Damian Harris had 109 yards, or 109 carries, over twice as many. He had 442 yards, over twice as many. And where Rhamondre Stevenson had 1 touchdown, Damian Harris had 7. The only person that saw more carries inside the 10-yard line last year was Jonathan Taylor. Damian Harris ranked on PFF as the best running back in the league last year. So I think people just get so enamored with the shiny new toy. And, a couple people, some Devy guys were hyping up Rhamondre Stevenson last year, and then he had a handful of good games, and now everyone thinks Rhamondre Stevenson is still the guy. No, it's Damian Harris. And we see Bill Belichick, when a guy's on the last year of his career, he is going to run Damian Harris into the ground. Damian Harris is seeing 250 touches minimum this year.
I'm going to get invested.
Okay.
I'll beat you to him.
That's a spicy. I didn't expect that. Look, I've been down on Damian Harris. I don't know. I don't see him repeating anything close to what he did last year, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he does just have enough work to make it relevant, and maybe he can get close to, 10, 12 touchdowns again. Who knows?
In people's mind, it's a 50-50 split.
And that's what some reports are saying right now is that, last year, and it's always been with the Patriots running backs, everyone has a very specialized role. They've got their early down guy. They've got their goal line guy. They've got their passing down guy. And Damian Harris and Rhamondre Stevenson are both do-it-all backs. And now with James White being out of the picture, some reports out of camp are that is what it's going to be, that both of these guys are going to be playing on all 3 downs, and it's going to be a little bit more of a rotation. And I like Rhamondre Stevenson, don't get me wrong. I just think that Damian Harris is the better overall running back, and I think that Bill Belichick trusts him more. And then, like I already said, being on the last year of his contract, I think that because of that, they really run him into the ground.
I like it. I like it. I might have to take advantage of that then.
Yeah, and you're getting him for cheap right now. I don't know if you've seen recent ADP, but you can get Damian Harris 2 rounds after Rhamondre Stevenson. And that's what's crazy to me is people have gone so crazy with the Rhamondre Stevenson love and talking about the contingency value if something happens to Damian Harris and he gets hurt. What happens if Rhamondre Stevenson gets hurt? I mean, it goes both ways, and I think the pendulum has just swung too far towards Rhamondre Stevenson at this point.
Rhamondre Stevenson is invincible. It is a fact. That's wild, man. All right, before we let you get on with your life out of here, real quick, give me a tight end that you like late in drafts after you missed all the hot names.
Other than Cole Kmet.
Other than Cole Kmet.
All right, so we're past Zach Ertz, we're past Cole Kmet. There's 2 guys that I like targeting, and I kind of double tap these guys in the 16th, 17th round of a lot of my drafts. Evan Ingram and Hayden Hurst. And the reason I like pairing these 2 guys up together is because I feel like they each have paths to very big seasons, but for different reasons. Evan Ingram's going to see it because of volume. Evan Ingram's not a guy that's going to have 50 catches and 15 touchdowns. He's a guy that's probably going to see 100 to 120 targets this year. And the hit rate for tight ends that see over 100 targets is pretty high. If he can crack into that 125 or more targets, he's got an 87% hit rate of finishing as a top 3 tight end over the last 20 years. So there's that possibility where he could really break out.
Nice
we know that Doug Peterson loves tight ends. And, a lot of people like to say, well, Doug Peterson had Zach Ertz and, he had Dallas Goedert and Travis Kelce. But you can even look when those guys were hurt. he was force-feeding 9 targets a game to Richard Rodgers. I mean, this is just what Doug Peterson does. He loves throwing the ball to tight ends. So Evan Ingram's a guy that I really like.
On a team that needs more pass catchers to step up. It's not like he's competing with 3 really good players.
Right, and I like Christian Kirk, but it wouldn't surprise me one bit if Evan Ingram leads the team in targets at the end of the season. I mean, we used to see with Zach Ertz back in the day, and this team, they're going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets. I mean, if we're talking super late, I don't even hate Dan Arnold. I mean, I drafted him in the final round of my Scott Fishbowl draft. But the other guy I like is Hayden Hurst for completely opposite reasons. I don't think that he's going to see anywhere near 100 targets. He probably won't even see more than 60 targets. But we saw with CJ Uzomah, you know, the defenses get so focused on Jamar Chase and T. Higgins on both sides of the field that it leaves the middle of the field wide open, and that's where Hayden Hurst does his best. So I could see Hayden Hurst, you know, just kind of stumbling into a dozen touchdowns this year, and you've got the high floor guy in Evan Ingram, and then you've got the high ceiling guy in Hayden Hurst. I really like pairing those two up in builds.
I like that. I like that
Very
a lot.
Well said right there.
Hayden Hurst reminds me a lot of like Austin Hooper. A couple years ago. So I like
another
that.
Late round target that I like.
For sure. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Hooper. I find myself drafting a lot of David Njoku lately. You know, for nothing other than the fact that he's probably going to be the number 2 target on that team.
Just got a big deal too. Jacoby Brissett likes that short part of the field, and that's where David Njoku operates.
And
I love Njoku too. Evan Ingram, Hayden Hurst, David Njoku, Gerald Everett, that's my comfort zone for tight ends. You know, if I can't get one of the top 3 guys, for me, it's Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Kyle Pitts. I want one of those 3. If I'm not getting any of those guys, I'm not even looking at tight ends until I get to the Cole Kmet and under tiers.
Right. Okay, so no Goddard, no Ertz. I guess Ertz is in the Kmet tier. At least at ADP.
He started to creep up a bit.
You want to grab one of those 2, if possible, and then one of the later guys.
Well, with how many drafts I do, I mean, nobody is off my draft board. If anybody slides, I'll take him at the right price. You know, I'm not a TJ Hawkinson fan, but if he slides a round and a half past ADP, I'll take him. And the same thing with all of these other guys. The only guys that I'm really targeting at ADP, it's once you get to Zach Ertz, Cole Kmet, I'll take those 2 guys at ADP. And then after that, it's, like we said, Gerald Everett, Njoku, Ingram, and Hayden Hurst.
Love it.
Love it, man. Hey, thank you so much for taking the time, man. It's awesome to really hear your process, and look, I'm glad you say you're a Bears fan. I need you to drop the Packers as soon as possible. It doesn't feel good. Okay, I need. It's gonna be a rough. You poured a bunch of water through a wet blanket on my hopes and dreams. They weren't really that bright anyway. But
at least when the touchdown is against the Bears, it'll be to Lazard. So it's kind of a loss and a win at the same time.
Exactly. And we could always you know, if you really want to, you know, get into it a little bit, you could just wait for the Packers to choke in the postseason, and then you can have your fun.
Okay.
It's Christmas.
Now we're getting to the Barstool part of the interview.
All right.
Thank you,
Dave,
man. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody for listening. Dave, is there anything special you have going on? I know people can find you over Football Guys. Follow you at Dave Kluge on Twitter. Anything else special before we get you out of here?
No, just follow me on Twitter at Dave Kluge, and then 4 shows a week over at Football Guys, writing articles, doing the social media, all that fun stuff, doing a mock draft tomorrow. So, just follow us at footballguys.com. I was a huge fan of Football Guys before I ever even started working there. I was a 15-year member. So just, working for my dream website, it's a great company, and I'm just thrilled to be a part of what they're doing.
Living the
dream.
Big
fans of you guys.
Living the dream. Thanks so much for taking the time, Dave. It's been a pleasure having you on. As always, thank you for listening, and remember, losing sucks. Don't do it.